Hello and welcome to the Walk Around Podcast. Our goal, as always, is to share with you the insights, the skills, the processes, and the leaders that are influencing the retail automotive landscape today. Today, we got a great episode for you. We're welcoming back Tony Carroll from Google. Welcome, Tony.
Hey, good to be back. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Just a quick refresher. Tony is a senior automotive strategist at Google. He collaborates with individual dealers, dealer groups, and OEMs to consult on Google's digital solutions and develop effective programs to support the brand and, more importantly, drive results for dealers. So I'm super excited to have you back. You know, in our last episode, Tony, we focused a lot on kind of the sales side of the conversation. And we said we wanted to come back and talk about how technology and how analytics can help drive the fixed operations side of the business. So I guess overall, what's the opportunity look like there? How do dealers jump off there? But maybe we'll start with kind of the opportunity that you see in your experience and go from there.
Hey, thanks for that intro. And I want to apologize in advance that if a couple of 11-year-old twin boys run past anyone in the background, welcome to my home office life during COVID.
Yeah.
Anyone watching this, I'm sorry if a couple of shirtless children run past me in the background.
But certainly we've all become accustomed to that during this time. But,
I'm ready to get back into the office, I think, like we all are. But great lead in. Thank you. Always embarrassing to hear people talk about you, but been in the industry many years and spent the past 5 years at Google. Before that, worked for an OEM for about 10 years and was in retail before that. So love the auto industry, seen a lot of changes in the past, 15, 20 years. But yeah, the timing's perfect to really talk about parts and service and dive in. When you look about, the current landscape we're in with inventory, right? Who doesn't hear about this on a daily basis? I hesitate to ever use the word unprecedented because I think it gets overused. We all love to say unprecedented, but
yep.
I think there's an argument here that this is fairly unprecedented to have an inventory situation quite like this. I've driven by countless dealer lots in the past month and am seeing a lot of pavement. Not used to seeing that much pavement.
Yeah.
So the struggle's real. And until we get through this microchip shortage, we're going to be in this boat for a minute. So, it really begs the question, then how do we pivot? And I think right now is a great time to talk about fixed ops on that side of the house. If you look at the stats from IHS, the average age of vehicles on the road today is at an all-time high. So it's at 11.9 years. And that's up like 24% versus 2002. It's continued to grow. The average age of vehicles getting older and older on the road. And not only that, also per IHS, we have a record number of vehicles on the road. We've got about 280 million vehicles on the road today. So there's more on the road and they're older.
Yeah.
If you're a dealer listening today, where my head goes is how do I capture that in my service drive? Because they're out of warranty and we're talking about customer pay ROs and we need to, capture those folks, get them back into the service drive so that we can service their vehicles. And I think this is a great time to talk about that.
And so, and completely agree. And I think the other thing is, or I would just comment, the muscles that you can build now, I think through a service retention program will only pay dividends when they get in the market, when they decide, hey, this car's 11.9 years old. And, at 13, I'm trading it. Come hell or high water, I'm trading it. And so, creating that relationship and stickiness with kind of your dealership through that service drive kind of helps grease or create that ecosystem along the whole way, right?
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
So why? That's kind of natural. Like, okay, it helps a lot of different things. It can help retention in the store. It can help potentially help me get used car inventory where I don't have to go compete against other dealers for kind of that.
Absolutely. Yep.
But how can I leverage technology to help kind of support, to help push people into the service drive?
Yeah, this is an interesting one that, of course, I work in this space, so to me it seems so obvious, but I
Right.
recognize that old habits die hard, and often through no fault of their own, often the folks that are in the fixed op side of the house, they have other priorities. They're not, the first thing they think about when they walk into the service drive every morning is not Facebook and Google search.
Right.
They have so many other things on their mind with people and inventory, and but yet, having said that, it's 2021, and when we look at stats and consumer behavior, and for example, 43% of people that recently purchased parts and service called that dealership directly from a search result, right? And we start thinking about this consumer behavior, it begs the question, like, why are we not pivoting our mindset? We're still spending a great deal of money and resources on things like direct mail and other media to drive interest. And the interesting thing about search is you're actually just capturing it. There are people out there looking for your dealership right now. They're going to Google and they're typing in the name of the OEM, the name of the model, and then something like maintenance, oil change, tires, batteries, and then maybe near me or zip code. They're just looking for you. You don't need to drum up the interest. You don't need to go generate awareness or consideration. They need it. They just looked at their odometer. They realize they're overdue for an oil change. They realize that their tires are low. Their car won't start. And, Nick, they said they pulled out their smartphone and they said, I need to find, this branded service. And often the dealers just simply are not there.
Right.
It's a $350 billion a year industry when we look at that fixed ops space. And yet when you look at the revenue stream, only about 30% of that at most is being captured by dealers, and the rest are being captured by independents. And I think a big reason for that is that dealerships have really been slow to adopt digital transformation.
So it's interesting, and I want to kind of get back to kind of the search piece for a second, but that stat is interesting to me. So it's a $350 billion industry. The dealers are capturing a third, but they're franchise dealers starting every relationship, right? I mean, the new car generates from a franchise dealer, and so 2/3 essentially are falling off at various points, kind of down the line. Is that fair there?
Home field advantage.
Yeah.
You are the last person to greet that customer when you have that delivery. And you hopefully are, of course, walking them through the service drive and TOing them to the service manager and making that introduction and all that good stuff. See, I was in retail, Nick.
There you go.
Work at Google, but believe me, I made that TO several times. But
you did the service walk before letting them go.
Do the service walk. That's right.
Yeah.
But home field advantage. But yet, often those customers just slip through our fingers because there are other businesses out there whose livelihood depends on their ability to capture that interest. And they can't afford to miss. So they have teams out there that are focused on, Google best practices and things like search and social. I'll tip my hat to my friend Bob Lanham out there at Facebook. Digital is important, right? I'm not here to say that it's all about Google, but what I am here to say is that when you look at the stats and it show that it's often the last thing that they do before they go in and make a purchase. It really begs the question, do our budgets accurately reflect modern consumer behavior, or do our budgets really reflect more like consumer behavior 10 or 15 years ago, which sounds drastic, but it's really not. Often we find that budget allocations are really matching behaviors as high as 15 years ago or more.
Well, I think we spoke about this last time on the sales side, but it's like, search is the new Yellow Pages. And I can recall, the time sitting with Yellow Pages and designing that and paying extra and all the kind of strategy that went into kind of your Yellow Pages ad. And are dealers taking the same approach or investing that same amount of time and positioning themselves through search that they would if there was a physical book they could open up and look at the competitors and kind of see who's dominating the page and all that good stuff.
True statement. Not only that, when we start to think about margins,
yeah,
it also begs a question like, are we investing the right time and resources in that side of the house? And you start to think about the margin on a new car, right? And I won't disclose, anyone's margins, but look, it's no secret that new car margins have not exactly gotten larger over the past 10 years. And so when you start to think about margins and you look at the fixed op side of the house, really your margins are there. And if you show me a dealership that's got a really strong fixed absorption, I will show you a much happier dealership, right? We all know that. So you really start to think about, are we investing in that side from a digital standpoint? According to Google, 1 in 3 of our automotive searches are actually parts and service related. They're not all new car. So when people are in those moments where they look at their odometer and they realize they're overdue for an oil change, or they're, like I said, their tires might be running a little low or going bald, they go to Google and they look for maintenance near them.
Right.
And so when they do that, we want them to find what they're looking for. So I'll just use an example. Okay.
Sure.
And there's a lot of different OEMs that'll hear this call. So someone's gonna, of course, wish I would have used their OEM, but we'll use Toyota because you're in Deerfield Beach and SET is right there, right? So
yeah, for sure.
Let's say that someone drives a Toyota Corolla and they want to find maintenance near them. Their car is maybe 6 or 7 years old and they need maintenance. Well, they often turn to Google and say, Toyota Corolla maintenance near me. And what we want to happen when that happens is we want them to find a Toyota result.
Right.
They're not searching for an independent. If they're searching for an independent, then Google would like them to find an independent. But often they're searching for that OEM and the dealer just isn't there. They're simply not there. And so we want to start here grabbing some of that low hanging fruit. You don't have to build Rome in a day. You can just start with some of the basics and adhere to best practices. And the great news about it, Nick, is you can measure this. So you can start measuring how many times that someone called your dealership from that service ad, or how many times they clicked for an appointment, or even, and I love this one, you can measure how many times they visited your store through store visits conversions.
So let's say I'm not a Toyota dealer. Let's say I'm a Chrysler dealer. And I'm like, okay, how do I get the low hanging fruit? Like, how do I capture that 7-year-old Chrysler product that somebody's Googling, nearest Chrysler maintenance facility?
Yeah, you think about the services you offer.
Right.
And then you think about some of these, like maybe quick lane items that are the lower hanging fruit to try to get the people into the store. And this is important. This is a great question, because you might think, well, maybe I don't make that much off of that oil change. Well, maybe you don't, but neither does Jiffy Lube or the other, right? But what you do need to do is get that customer in where you can then do that multi-point inspection and the walk around of the vehicle. And then you realize that they also need a tire rotation and a new air filter, and you can give them a good customer experience, right? You can treat them well, and then then now they appreciate you, and hopefully you've made a new customer. And then when they need a new vehicle, you can sell them a new vehicle. It's all about getting them to the store. So to answer your question, you focus on the basics.
Yeah.
You don't have to this isn't like I said, building Rome in a day. You do not have to be like this digital expert overnight. You can focus on basic maintenance, like oil changes and tires and batteries and other maintenance. And then what you do is you can instruct Google to focus on a narrow radius around your store.
Right.
This is called radius targeting.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of, say, focusing on a whole zip code, you can start small and say, hey, I want to focus on a 5-mile radius from my store. And then if that works, you maybe broaden it and say, I've got enough budget and I've measured my ROI. I know that I generated these phone calls or these appointments or store visits, and you know what? It worked. And my average RO is $200. I'm making this up. My average RO is $200 every time somebody pulls in here. And I know that I drove this many store visits, and my margin per RO is, let's say I'm making this up again, but let's say it's 55%. Well, now I'm working smart, right? Now I'm starting to really measure how much did I spend? How much of my media dollar that went into, say, Google drove how much revenue and profit for my store? And now we've elevated the conversation, and we're not just talking about like, well, I had a 20,000 piece mailer, and I did see Miss Jones brought it in, and she had it in her hand. Now we're talking about how much we actually spent versus the profitability that it drove to the store. And anyone can do this. You don't have to hire consultants, and you really can do this by just sitting down and putting a pencil to it.
Yeah. So ROI is a big piece of that. I guess from your perspective, how do we get, and I guess you said baby steps, right? So I guess I'm talking through my own answer here, right? It's like, hey, like what the first step I take is just like try to measure your own ROI today in the fixed space. Yeah,
I think the baby steps is search, because you're likely already doing some things to generate awareness. Right. And that's why I joked earlier about my friend Bob at Facebook, right? Like you're probably already doing some social, you're probably already doing some direct mail. So, well, what do you think they do when that stuff works? Well, they pull out their smartphone and they look for you, or they look for, or they maybe remember, right, that they remember they got a mailer 2 months ago. Maybe they don't even remember where it's from, but you planted that seed, and then they turn to search when they're in that moment of need. And so you want to show up. So the first thing you do really is that baby step is, how do we show up for those important moments with search? And we don't have to break the bank, but we can focus on a radius around the store. So I'd start with maybe 5 miles, depending on your market. You can go 10 miles, maybe 5 miles. You can go in and tell Google how many miles that you want your radius to be, because some dealers, right, we're all in different markets. Miami is different than say Lincoln, Nebraska. Right. Markets are going to be different. And then from there, measure. Like you got to measure success. So you want to measure how many phone calls. Hopefully you have store visits. You can measure how many store visits you generated, click for appointments. And then now you start to like back into ROIs to think, all right, well, what's my average RO? What's my margin per RO? And now I have an ROI calculator. So that's how I would begin. And then from there, you can build. Like we've laid a good foundation. Now we can start expanding the radius and start using some of these like machine learning tactics like smart bidding, where Google goes in and uses machine learning to like optimize toward outcomes. So you can try to smart bid to max conversions, smart bid to store visits. And now we're starting to work a little smarter. We're using technology. Then you can start taking steps beyond that to leverage video and YouTube, right? Which is a drastically underutilized tool as well. In fact, for those that watched a video that recently purchased parts and service, 84% of them use YouTube. Wow. So it might sound like a lot to a dealer listening today who's like never done search, and they're like, man, you're already talking about YouTube. Like this is over my head. And that's okay. Right. You can just start with the basics, but you absolutely need to focus on search.
And so like I think about it, and correct me here if I'm wrong. It's like, hey, I may need something. I may know that I need to contact this franchise dealer, but I don't have the contact information on my phone. And so I'm going to naturally just go to search to either figure out how I can engage them with a phone number, or engage them in chat, or engage them, on my own term, right? Is that, right. Is that fair? Kind of.
Right. We get in our funnels. And so we kind of start to think about who our customers are, and we think about retention in terms of the definitions that we've been given as far as what retention really means. And we should, right? We want to win President's Award. We want to win these awards. So right. I get all that, but we also have to think about world implications that somebody may have moved to your market and they need service, and you didn't know that they moved there. Someone might be commuting and they work in your market, but they don't live in your market. So their IP address might be in a different town, right? Their record of where they live, according to Pulp or someone else, might be in a different town, but their mobile device is passing through your market because they work in your market. And so there's ways that we need to think about this more, from more of a digital transformation piece, right? And embracing digital, especially mobile. So there's ways that we can work smart. Remember, like 75% of these folks that recently purchased parts and service use search. Mm-hmm. So we got to use search. We got to capture them when they're in that moment in our market, and then keep them coming to the store. And then for the reasons I mentioned earlier, right? We want to upsell them. We want to do the multi-point inspection,
Yeah.
hopefully sell them a new car as well.
But you can't do any of that till you get them in the store, right? So like being kind of prevalent helps drive all of that good stuff. So okay, so pivoting just I guess a bit, what's kind of cool coming down the pipe from Google's perspective? What do you guys got kind of working to kind of help support all this piece?
Well, I think so. I alluded earlier to something called smart bidding, which some of you out there might think, man, what are you talking about? So as far as something cool coming down the pipe, this is what, after the initial foundation is laid and we are at least allocating some budget to search, we've identified moments in search, right? That these services we provide, we want to capture that branded search intent, by the way. We want to focus on our brands, right? So just quick one there. I do not advocate that, let's say you're a Ford dealer, that you all of a sudden go out tomorrow and you start buying Chevy terms,
right?
Whether it's new car or parts and service. We do not advocate that as a best practice. It's really a high risk, low reward, approach. But we really recommend that you cover the basics, and then from there you start to use the tools that are available to you. Often, these are free tools. Still just paying per click. It's not like you get charged extra for using machine learning.
Right.
What we found is that machine learning has really transformed the way we live our life, and in many ways we don't even realize it. But we have machine learning that goes into autonomous driving cars. We have machine learning that's in video games. All this really cool AI that's all around us that we often don't even realize. Well, that powerful technology can actually be used and is used every day in marketing. And it's a way that you can put your ad in front of the right user at the right time. And so that ad is more useful and relevant to that user, right? So the way you do that as a dealer is you can leverage something called smart bidding with Google. And it's a dealer's way of saying, look, here's my budget. My budget is X. And I want you to use machine learning to maximize the amount of conversions or business outcomes that I get as a dealer on this budget. And what you do then is you start to eliminate some of these like human manual inputs where you have somebody staying up till 1 a.m. and figuring out keywords on their own and changing the way that they bid. We've proven over and over that machine learning can outperform that of a human with their manual input. We really believe that our partners and the folks, the humans working on this should be talking about strategy and seasonality and really doing that and not going in and like trying to manually bid and manually change keywords. In fact, I mentioned this at a recent meeting. Over 10% of our searches last year were completely new at Google. We'd never seen them before, totally new words and variations. And so, that's something to keep in mind, that if you want to stay ahead, when you talk about like what's new, what's coming down the pipe, is really leveraging smart bidding, so that smart bidding can go out and look at all these different intent signals in milliseconds and put them together so that your ad gets in front of the right person at the right time, because that's what you want, right? You want to drive
so
to the store.
Let me make sure I understand kind of that piece of it. So new searches 10%.
Yeah.
Never heard of all this kind of stuff. So if I'm trying to manually do this and it's like I can't keep up with that 10%. And what machine learning provides me is like not only efficiency, but it can keep up and keep me kind of in front of that wave. But now the person, for lack of a better term, can focus on kind of other things than kind of trying to play catch up. Is that?
Yeah. Think of it this way. This is a great analogy for our business.
Yeah.
We often get trapped in this idea of a keyword strategy. And why not? Right. It's fun to talk about. And for years, our industry was really just overcome with these swim lane conversations, right? Where we say, hey, I'm going to own best SUV. You own, dealership near me, right? And so we're all, it seems like this match made in heaven. But here's where there's a curveball, is that with the advancements in machine learning capabilities, you could have 3 different people all search for best SUV or oil change or tires. But these people all have different needs and wants and different journeys.
Right.
One of these people might have just had a life event and they are concerned about safety. The other person really is more of an avid outdoorsman, and they are concerned about capability, off-road capability and performance, right? And so the reason that matters to a dealer is because if you leverage machine learning, you can then present them a more relevant, useful ad. They still search for the same thing. They
Right.
use the exact same query, like say best SUV, but you can present them a better experience because now you have insight into what is really important to them, like safety or performance. So all
So,
those can be used for parts and service as well.
and so in real life, it's the family that's growing is not getting served up the Jeep Wrangler, Rubicon, versus kind of the guy that's looking for a rock hopper is potentially served up the off-road thing. And that's real life, right?
Yeah, I mean, in principle, that's kind of
Yeah.
what we're getting to. Doesn't mean that somebody wouldn't want a Jeep Rubicon, right? I mean,
Right.
but we all have our journey and we all have our different wants and needs. And so, leveraging these tools and these innovations like machine learning, like Google Smart Bidding, is a way to just make your media dollar work a little harder for you. And you can do that through parts and service. But I would suggest at least starting with basics and
Yeah.
starting with you got to allocate some money to search. You can start with a small radius around the store, and then from there you build. But measure, measure, measure. You want to make sure that you're measuring what's important to you, like store visits and phone calls and click for appointments. We want people coming to your service drive.
Yeah.
It doesn't do you any good. We don't want you to just drive a bunch of clicks. You could have all the impression share in the world, and if you don't sell, any more, LOFs or any more ROs, then what was the point, right? We
Yeah.
want to drive profitability and help you continue to service your community. So that's what we want to do in the end, and that's what search is going to be one of your best friends in doing that.
Yeah. So I think I think a great little message to sum it up is like when you're setting that strategy, don't forget about the value. I think we started the value that a service drive provides to the dealership as a whole, and allocating some of those that investment to making sure that when people are searching for search, they find you. Right. So, Tony, so if I'm a dealer and I need some help, where can I find you?
Well, I tell you what, my boss and I joke about this all the time because I'm a dealer guy and I would love for all the dealers to just call me directly on my cell phone and I would come to their store and work with them. Unfortunately, there are 17,000 dealerships in the US, and the automotive retail team at Google and all of our different OEM teams that support retail, we really just can't be in every store. But the good news is, you have OEM partners, you have marketing managers in your regional OEM offices that typically all have a direct line to Google. I know that I talk to many of them every week. You also should hopefully have partners that have been vetted and that you trust to handle, let's say, your website or your SEM strategy. So you really need to lean on those partners and ask them if they're up to speed on the latest of Google POVs and best practices. We just launched the new Dealer Guidebook 2.5 in February of this year. And we'd launched 2.0 in February of last year. And then we launched 1.0 back in like 2000, was it 17? It's been a while. But that would be my first step, is talking to my partners, both at my OEM office and my SEM partner, and asking them what our strategy is for parts and service, and then working with them. And if you'd like to get some Google feedback as well, then you can ask your regional office or your partner when the next Google meeting is that you'd like to attend. You'd like to see a copy of the Dealer Guidebook. And actually, what I'll do, Nick, is I'll send you a copy of the latest Google Dealer Guidebook.
Yeah, I love that.
You can share it with anyone that asks for it. I'll send you a PDF version.
Yeah, that'd be great. And then we will certainly in the comment section link to Tony on LinkedIn if you want to find him there. And then if you need to ask some questions, look for your OEM providers and then your team you've built around you to help drive the strategy. So, Tony, this has been great.
I want to leave you with a story that you'll like.
I can't wait.
Okay.
With it.
So, and for you dealers out there that are listening, you'll hopefully like this too. But I want you to imagine for a minute that you pulled up to your dealership and you've got your coffee in your hand and you walked into the showroom floor and you looked at your desk manager, everything looks great. You walk through the service drive, everything looks great. But then you notice in the service drive that you look out and there is a guy in a golf shirt with an independent on the label. And you're thinking, gosh, that's weird. Here's a guy in a Jiffy Lube or an independent label in the golf, and he's talking to someone in your service drive. So you go over there and you kind of lean in and you listen, and he says, "Hey, Mrs. Jones, I noticed that your car is here at this dealership for an oil change. Did you know that we actually can service this oil change at my shop? Our prices are competitive. We'll get you out probably even quicker. If you want, you can just follow me over to my shop."
Right.
I know this is funny, and I know this sounds drastic, and I tell this story to dealers.
It's the truth, though. It's the truth.
Some of them laugh, but we could never imagine that happening, right? If that happened, it would be like big problems. There'd be probably an altercation on the service drive.
Yeah.
I mentioned this story to prove a point, and that is millions of times per day, this is happening where today's shopper goes to Google, they look for their OEM brand, make, model, maintenance, and then what happens is the dealer isn't there. And so they then click, and these other companies are making it easier for them to do business with them because they have links to click for appointment, click for directions, click here to download our coupons. And they're doing all these things to make it easy. So Nick, I had to tell you that story because we need to get fired up about this. Inventory is low. It's a great time to talk about fixed ops and use technology to your advantage.
Yeah, and listen, it's a great analogy because the reality is we would react differently if that were the case. So, Tony, this has been great, and appreciate the insight. Always appreciate the insight. I'm also appreciative of your boys for keeping their shirts on. We love having you on the podcast. For you listeners out there, if there's other topics you're interested in from Google or anything related to retail, send us a note and we'll be glad to have them on. So, Tony, thank you very much. Make sure to like and share this with your friends, and we'll see you next time on the Walk Around.
Thanks for having me, Nick.